The new Weslie and William Janeway Institute in Economics is going to invest in transforming economic research, disseminating frontier work in the Faculty of Economics. Bill is an alumnus of the PhD program at Cambridge. I'm pleased to say he's joining me now. As part of our occasional series Talking to Bill, I asked him about the rise of the digital economy, and in particular, why it's been emphasising inequalities. What sort of research would you like to see the new institute be doing in terms of the digital economy?
Well, I think there are two aspects of that. One is, I think the collaboration with the computer lab and the potential for an MPhil in data science and economics definitely points in one direction. The digitalization has meant extraordinary increases in the generation and capture of data about behaviors, individual, group, collective, social behaviors, and obviously, most importantly, market behaviors. Economics has always been the data-rich social science. And it has been, as I mentioned before, a pioneer in applying to the sort of data economists deal with more and more sophisticated, powerful techniques for cutting through the sea of correlations, most of which are completely false, that have no causal bearing at all. They're coincidental. But machine learning, the algorithms of machine learning, what they do is identify correlations. They do not define causality. So more work on that, which will have significance at every level, the micro level, the middle level of, for example, supply chain networks, and the macro level. More work on that is really important. And then the other area which is also related to what you've just been saying, is also ongoing. There is a collaboration, relatively small now, but I think it is likely to grow, where understanding how digitalization transforms the structure of markets and the behavior of markets. Obviously, we see this in the rise of the digital platform companies, which are creating two-sided markets for drivers and markets for riders. Well, we haven't seen this in anything like the same sort of scale in the past. We've seen it in the financial markets, but understanding this in the real economy, and then understanding how these chains aggregate up to a macroeconomics, which is much more fine-grained. There's a long history of, at the macro level, doing what is called reduced form economics, taking the great aggregates of consumption, investment, government spending as the building blocks of macroeconomic models. Well, we've learned, and we have now the data to operationalize the recognition that within these aggregates, people are very, very different. And the notion that we can abstract representative agents from this aggregation of highly heterogeneous participants is extremely challenging. But it goes with trying to come to grips. And this is the last area that I think really I'm hopeful Cambridge and the new institute will play a role in exploring, is this recognition of the extreme increase in inequality of income and wealth, and that has consequences for macroeconomics and for specific industries and markets. And the exploration first of the sources of rising inequality over the last 40 to 50 years and the consequences of that inequality, and finally, perhaps, alternative approaches towards working to reduce that inequality is I think absolutely central to the future of economics. For a long time, distribution as a subject of economic analysis and research and as a target of economic policy essentially dropped out. It was assumed and rationalized by neoclassical, neoliberal economic theory that whatever distribution was generated from market behavior, distribution both of income and wealth, was in some sense fair due to the process of competition from which it emerged. But of course, we know that competition is not a constant and that perfect competition is a fantasy. So digging into that whole net, that nest of issues, I think is absolutely central for economics, both to fulfill its promise to help us understand how the world works and how we can usefully adjust, address that working, but also to help make it relevant and credible to people who are living the reality of radically unequal income and wealth and opportunity.
And if I may, Bill, can I look at some of those inequalities in terms of the digital economy? Now, with each digital bubble that we've had, some people have become rich, a few people have become exceptionally wealthy. But is there actually any real benefit to society in having those digital bubbles that we've had?
Well, I've written about this at great length in my book, in various writings, in lectures. It's a central theme of my course, that financial markets and assets, wherever they arise, can, without exception, generate speculative bubbles, unsustainable increases in the prices of assets that become completely decoupled from the underlying cash flows that ownership of those assets confer on the owners. Most of the time, the assets that are subject to that speculation are assets that investment in purchasing them generates no increase in production possibilities, in productivity, in the frontier available for people to consume and to enjoy the benefits. Particularly, of course, trading in existing real estate creates no social benefit. Trading in tulip bulbs creates no social benefit. Trading in cannabis stocks, I find it hard to believe, generates much social benefit. And we will have a great test now as to whether speculative trading in digital assets, crypto assets, will generate meaningful betterment of economic possibilities. I believe that the technologies underlying crypto may indeed contribute usefully in particular applications, but as we are now seeing, will only do so to the extent and as they are subject to regulatory structures of the sort that have arisen with respect to trading in all financial assets and their use in the real economy. So occasionally, financial speculation focuses on one of those sets of assets that are generated by technological innovation and that actually have the potential of transforming the structure and the performance of the real economy. The first one on which we have real data, the railway manias of the early 19th century, the 1830s and 40s in Britain, the 1850s in the United States, massive investment in building railroads with enormous speculative interest as it became clear that this was something new and different. These weren't just toys going around circular tracks like Stephenson's original rocket. These are moving goods and people and transforming the economic geography of the country in ways that were unimaginable previously. A new economy could be discerned on the horizon. Okay, the bubble burst. Many of those companies building railroads went bankrupt, but nobody pulled up the railroad tracks. The new structure was in place, the new economy followed. Similarly with electrification, from the end of the 19th century, especially in the 1920s, the bull market, the great Wall Street bull market of the roaring 20s, I always like to say, was not just about bathtub gin and the Charleston and Flappers and Scott Fitzgerald novels. It also involved funding massive investment in building out electrical generating capacity and distribution, the grid, across the United States and to a lesser extent in other countries. There was a productive bubble within the speculation. And similarly, of course, in the 1990s, the great internet tech .com bubble of the second half of the 1990s, indeed, it produced a transient phenomenon like pets.com or in Britain, boo.com, but it also produced Amazon. And when the bubble burst, many of the new telecommunications companies that had grown up to lay the fiber optic cables across the country, across the oceans, intercontinentally, they went bankrupt. In one case, their chief executive officer was sent to jail for 25 years for fraud. But nobody pulled up those fiber optic cables. They were available for good or ill for Facebook and YouTube and WhatsApp and Instagram and Pinterest, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the concept of productive bubbles within this long history of speculation in financial markets is increasingly recognized, subject of very powerful research. And it will be ongoing. It will be ongoing. We'll be seeing how the radical reduction in interest rates driven by central banks, first in response to the global financial crisis and then in response to the pandemic, has clearly incentivized extraordinary speculation in a variety of assets, including the, quote, the meme stocks of brokerage firms like Robinhood, as well as the crypto assets. At some point, interest rates will rise, perhaps directly in response to or in anticipation of a return towards more historically relevant rates of inflation. And when they do, we'll have one of those great moments characterized by Warren Buffett as to when the tide rolls out, we find out who's been swimming naked. And no doubt, a number of the speculative beneficiaries of this unusual financial regime, we will find have been swimming naked and withdraw from further competition. But there will be, certainly, there will be some sustainable businesses that pay their bills not by selling securities, but by selling goods and services to generate more revenue than it costs to develop and deliver those goods and services, just as was the case with Amazon. There will be some significant sustainable survivors. And that's the usual pattern of a productive bubble.
Thanks, Bill. Really fascinating insight. Really good talking to you. We'll have more in our next episode.
Okay. Thank you very much, Julian.